Maybe you haven't said it out loud. Maybe you haven't even thought it clearly. But something inside you already knows. There's a part of you that's been fading, and even though you keep functioning, showing up, doing what's expected, you're not creating. And that, though it may not seem like it, hurts. There's an inner fire that can't be seen but burns. If you don't listen to it, if you don't make space for it, if you keep pushing it aside for later, it consumes you in silence, because the soul doesn't shut down all at once. It folds in on itself slowly, until one day you wake up and no longer know exactly when you stopped being you. This book doesn't start with techniques. It won't give you magic formulas or strategies to do more. That's not what we came for. This book is something else. It's a key. A key to open the door you closed the day you decided that creating wasn't for you. Maybe it was when you were a child and you drew outside the lines and someone told you that wasn't how it was done. Maybe it was at home when you dreamed out loud and were told not to be naive. Maybe it was later when you did something purely out of love and someone made you feel like you were wasting your time. Or maybe it wasn't one moment. Maybe it was the slow, steady drip of small resignations. And now you're here. Your hands are still full of responsibilities, but empty of yourself. Believe me, you're not alone. Most people have learned to live by repeating, to follow the script, to stay within the lines, to disguise longing with productivity, to replace soul with efficiency. And in that silent trade-off, something is lost. You keep doing what's expected, but something feels missing. You're not sure what it is, but you know. And it's not lack, it's absence, the absence of your voice, of your impulse, of your unique way of seeing the world. That's what you've come to reclaim here. You don't have to be an artist to create. Creating isn't painting or singing or writing. Creating is living with your own direction. It's inventing a way of being in the world that isn't borrowed or imposed or inherited. It's building your path instead of walking the one others left behind. This book is for you if you've ever betrayed yourself, even without realizing it. If you've silenced an idea for fear of judgment, if you lowered your head so as not to make waves, if you stopped doing something because you thought you weren't talented enough. If you've ever looked at yourself in silence and thought, where did I go in all of this? We're not here to return you to the past. We're here to return you to the power of choosing today. You won't find lists or rules here. What you'll find is a voice that walks beside you, that doesn't teach, but accompanies, that doesn't push, but listens, that doesn't motivate, but ignites. Because what you're missing isn't motivation, it's permission. Permission to imagine, to make mistakes without guilt, to begin without knowing, to do something just because you feel it, to play again, to try even if you have no idea how it'll turn out, to say, I don't know why, but I want to do this. That's creativity. It's not talent, it's presence. It's not strategy, it's need. It's not brilliance, it's boldness. To create is to speak with the invisible. It's to move an energy that, if not expressed, stagnates. And when it stagnates, it turns into exhaustion, anxiety, disconnection. That's why this book isn't optional, it's urgent. Because there's something inside you that wants to come out. And it's not looking for fame, it's seeking freedom. It's not seeking perfection, it's seeking truth. There's a part of you that's tired of pretending, that wants to act without obligation, that wants to speak without asking for permission, that wants to move without explaining every step. And when you start listening to that part, everything else begins to fall into place, not magically, but truly, honestly, organically. This book didn't land in your hands by accident. You were the one who called it. You were the one who asked for this spark. You were the one who, without knowing it, had been waiting for this moment. You're not going to just read it. You're going to inhabit it. And what you do with it is entirely up to you. If you're ready to return to yourself, if you're ready to create even if you don't know where to begin, if you're ready to live without asking for permission, then stay. This is your journey, and it's already begun. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Spark. No one taught you how to be yourself. They taught you how to seem like someone, to behave, to give the right answer, not to look ridiculous, to stay quiet when you didn't have the proper response, to do what needed to be done, what was expected, what was considered right. And one day, without realizing it, you lost the spark. You stopped building castles out of empty boxes. You stopped singing without knowing the lyrics. You stopped writing without knowing if it made sense. You stopped dancing without music. You stopped imagining what it might be like to fly. Not because you didn't want to, but because they told you those things were no longer appropriate, that you had to grow up, be serious, think about your future. As if imagining weren't the first step toward creating it. As if playing weren't the most powerful way to train freedom. As if dreaming weren't also a way of existing, and you believed it, because everyone else believed it too, because at some point, someone believed it themselves and passed it on to you with the best intentions, and so you learned to do what was right, what was practical, what was profitable, what was urgent. But something inside you started to fade, not all at once, slowly, silently, like a candle that's still lit but no longer gives warmth, like music that's still playing but no one is dancing, like an idea that lives inside but never comes out, that something was your fire, your spark, your power to create. Because that's what you came here for, to create. It doesn't matter if you've never drawn, if you don't sing, if you don't know how to play an instrument. Creating isn't art, it's instinct. Creating is imagining a way out when no one else sees one. It's inventing an answer when you don't know what to say. It's changing direction when the road turns flat. It's taking what hurts and turning it into something that speaks. But for that, you first have to remember. And remembering hurts. Because you'll come face to face with the part of yourself you left behind to be more mature. You'll see your imagination mutilated, your intuition dismissed, your desire crushed under years of structure, of judgment, of routine, of pressure, of fear. You'll see the child who looked at clouds and invented stories, and the adult who only sees them now as a threat of rain. And you'll ask yourself, when was it that I forgot about myself? At what moment did I trade my voice for someone else's? When did I stop being fire and turn into functional ash? That's the right question, because no one can recover what they haven't recognized as lost. And yes, you lost it. But not forever. You just stored it away. You tucked it into an invisible box inside you, like adults do when they don't know what to do with what they feel. You called it immaturity, lack of focus, not being talented. And you left it there, until today. Because if you're here, if you're reading this, it's not a coincidence. There's a part of you that's still burning, that still wants to play, that still wants to invent, that still wants to live without a script. And this is the book that came to help you reignite it, not from nostalgia, from action, from awareness, from the body. Because yes, your body remembers too. It remembers when you danced without needing to record it, when you drew without expecting likes, when you wrote without knowing what an algorithm was, when you laughed without a filter, when you dared to invent what didn't exist yet. You didn't know you were a genius. No one did. And maybe you're not. But that doesn't matter, because a genius isn't the one who makes brilliant things. It's the one who allows themselves to make them without shutting down, without cutting themselves off, without editing before they even begin. A genius is the one who creates without permission, who laughs while trying, who gets messy, breaks things, explores, who doesn't need to do it well to do it, who isn't afraid of looking like a fool, because they know that a fool who tries is more alive than a wise man who never dares. So today, we're not here to perfect anything. We're here to recover. We're here to remember how to create, how it feels to imagine without fear, how to live in a body that's aligned with the soul, how to live without repeating. And you won't do that by reading inspirational quotes. You'll do it by acting, by trying, by failing, by playing. This book is not a map. It's a bonfire. It has no instructions. It has wood. You decide whether to light the fire or just stand there watching. But if you choose to light it, if you choose to create again, it won't be comfortable. It will be beautiful. It will be chaotic. It will be new. It will be you. Finally, you. And that's enough to start changing everything. Because there's nothing more creative than someone who decides to return to their fire, to their roots, to their laughter, to their madness, to their voice. And you're about to do it, not because you know how, but because you can no longer not do it, because living without creating has become unbearable. And that is the best thing that could have happened to you. Welcome. Welcome to you. Welcome to the art of being you. In a corner of the world where everything seemed correct, efficient, and functional, lived a man named Esteban. He was organized, responsible, had a stable job, a clean house, a reliable car, and a stable relationship that didn't excite him, but didn't hurt either. His life was a straight line without turns, without surprises, and without questions. Esteban never did anything that didn't serve a practical purpose. He didn't dance. He didn't draw. He didn't allow himself to waste time on nonsense. And every time his daughter asked him to make up a story before bed, he told her it was better to read a real one, with a beginning, middle, and end. One day, after an exhausting meeting, Esteban walked into an old second-hand shop looking for a gift for his father. Among rusty tools and broken lamps, he found a small carved wooden box with a design that reminded him of something he couldn't name. He opened it, and inside was a crumpled piece of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a child's drawing. Simple crayon lines showing a house, a sun, a dog, and a child with arms raised. At the bottom, in clumsy handwriting, it read, "Dad, this is me when I'm happy with you." Esteban stood still. He didn't know whose drawing it was or how it got there, but he felt a deep, quiet blow. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the times he had corrected her when she improvised songs. He thought of the times he had shut down her play with phrases like, "That's useless." And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside. He didn't cry. But that night, when he tucked her in, instead of reading the same story as always, he said, "Tonight, we're going to make one up together." There are changes that seem small, but open cracks where life can come in. Esteban didn't quit his job. He didn't become an artist. He didn't write a book. But he began to see the world again with the curiosity of someone who no longer feels mechanical. He allowed himself the freedom of not knowing what would come next. He began to play again. And that, even if it doesn't sound epic, was the beginning of a revolution. Because reclaiming your creativity isn't about changing your career. It's about changing your presence. It's about finding your voice again. It's about allowing yourself to do something not because you have to, but because you feel it. And that shift, though invisible, changes everything. Most people don't live, they repeat. They follow inherited patterns, assumed routines, habits that no longer mean anything. They wake up in a rush, eat without tasting, produce without pause, and reach the night without having inhabited their day. They're full of tasks but empty of expression. They've learned to be useful, not to be themselves. And when you stop expressing yourself, you begin to disappear while still alive. You might keep functioning, even smiling, but something inside begins to fade. Not your body, your soul. That part of you that needs to let out what it feels, create what it imagines, improvise what it doesn't understand. That part that doesn't ask for logic, it asks for permission. And the good news is, you don't have to be an artist to create again. You just have to be willing to make mistakes, to get messy, to try, to play without guarantees, to stop asking, "What's the point of this?" and start asking, "How does it feel to do it?" Because everything meaningful was once useless. Every great idea was born of chaos. Every invention started out as a game. Every creation began with a spark that couldn't be justified, but could be followed. Creativity isn't a luxury. It's a need. It's not a bonus. It's a right. And it's not a talent. It's a memory. One we all carry inside, though some have forgotten it under layers of judgment. The good news is you can return. You can always return. Another story. Mariana, 37 years old, 2 kids, a stable life. Until one day, while organizing a closet, she found a box full of old papers, her teenage years, songs, poems, silly drawings, letters she never sent. She read them like someone reading the remains of another life. She laughed. She cringed. She got emotional. And that night, she sat down to write for the first time in 20 years. She didn't know what she wanted to say, but her hand moved as if it had been waiting all along. She didn't publish anything. She didn't seek recognition. She just wrote and kept writing every night, like someone pouring a glass of wine or washing their face to rinse the day away. She didn't need explanations. She just needed to listen to herself. That too is creativity, not what's displayed, what's recovered, what's honored, what's cultivated in silence, because some seeds bloom without making a sound, but only if you dare to plant them. To create is to plant yourself. It's telling yourself, "I also have something to say, even if no one listens." It's trusting that your story deserves a place, even if it isn't perfect. It's giving yourself permission to try something just because it stirs inside you, because it reminds you that you're alive, because it brings you back to yourself. And when that happens, when you start expressing yourself without asking for permission, something shifts. The world doesn't stop, but your perception does. You stop feeling like life is running over you. You begin to walk with the rhythm of someone who no longer runs to arrive but stops to create. And that's where everything begins. That's where the spark is reborn, the one that belongs to you, the one you had forgotten. But that's still there, waiting for you to finally say, "Now yes, I'm ready." Picasso once said that we are all born artists, but the real challenge is to remain one as we grow. The phrase sounds beautiful, but it's actually a denunciation, a silent protest against the part of the world that teaches us to adapt, to function, to comply, to produce, but forgets to teach us how to protect the spark. Because the world doesn't reward those who play, but those who obey. Not those who imagine, but those who repeat. Not those who seek their voice, but those who fit the mold. But there comes a time in life when adapting is no longer an option, because adapting means drying up, and some bodies can't survive the drought any longer. Look at Elizabeth Taylor. Everyone remembers her as one of the most beautiful women of her century, but few remember that behind those violet eyes was a woman who reinvented herself more times than she married. She was an actress, yes, but also a businesswoman, an activist, a perfume creator, and a woman with a voice who never wanted to sound like anyone else. Beauty she had from birth, but the courage to create her own path, that was a decision. Because creating is also that, daring to step off script, to be more than what others expect, to use your story as a canvas and paint something different, even with the colors that hurt, especially with those. Some people think you can only create from a place of peace, that you need clarity, time, silence, that creativity comes on a silver platter when everything is in balance. And no, sometimes you create in the middle of a mess, with tears on your cheeks, with your soul raw, with your body exhausted, but with an inner need not to turn to stone. Joan of Arc didn't write books or paint canvases, but she was creative. She invented a way of being a woman that no one had dared to show before. She used her faith as armor and her voice as a sword. And though she was burned at the stake, her fire is still burning centuries later. That too is creativity, lighting a symbol that outlives your body. And you, without realizing it, do that all the time. Every decision you make leaves a mark in the air. Every word, a stroke on the invisible mural of the world. But since no one taught you that, you don't value it. Since no one applauds it, you don't repeat it. Since it doesn't get likes, you hide it. And so you slowly abandon your ability to create without even noticing, until one day your soul begins to scream for you to listen. There are women designing jewelry while their children sleep, men writing poems on the backs of bills, young people painting sneakers because they can't afford a canvas, elders building gardens with the patience of someone who knows time is not in abundance. None of them are famous, but they're all soul artists because they're all creating life in the middle of life. And that's what you need to reclaim. Not a grand project, not a clear purpose, not a new career, just the awareness that you can do something with what you feel, something other than hiding it, something other than pretending nothing is happening, something other than consuming to numb it. Pedro Almodovar's films wouldn't be what they are if he hadn't grown up in a town where women sat talking in doorways, surrounded by dust, drama, repressed desire, and twisted faith. It wasn't academia. It was his story, his surroundings, his contradictions. That's what makes someone a creator, the ability to look at their own chaos and turn it into language. And you have that. Your life has scenes, silences, wounds, bursts of laughter, anger, tenderness. Your life has narrative. You just don't see it that way because you're living it from the inside, and sometimes you have to step back to see the art you're already carrying. Think of it this way. If an architect builds a house and you spend 20 years decorating it, cleaning it, living in it, wouldn't you say that's also creating? The same happens with your story. The world gave you a structure, a childhood, a body, a voice. But everything else, you're building yourself. With every gesture, with every choice, with every boundary you set, and every hug you give, you're designing the place where your soul lives. You don't need to call it art. Call it whatever you want, but don't deny it. Because if you deny your capacity to create, you become a prisoner of what's already been established. And that's the greatest punishment of all, living inside a structure you didn't build, repeating ideas you never questioned, feeling things you never processed while time passes by like it means nothing. And no, you're not late. Because creativity doesn't have a schedule. It doesn't have an expiration date. It isn't tied to youth. Some discover their fire at 15. Others find it at 70. What matters is not dying before you've lit it. Marilyn Monroe once said, "Imperfection is beauty, madness is genius, and it's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring." She knew the real prison wasn't the neckline or the stereotype. It was living without soul. That's why she laughed, posed, acted, wrote verses no one ever read. She was more than her image, just like you. So much more. So do it. Not for fame, not for results. Do it for you. Because it's time to stop postponing what makes you feel alive. It's time to stop living as if life were just a rehearsal. It's time to stop going unnoticed, even by yourself. Today is the day. Even if you're unsure, even if no one understands, even if your whole body trembles. Today is the day you can begin to create again. And that, even if it seems small, is the beginning of everything. And you're about to start it. Again. Better. More you than ever before. There are people who walk through life without kicking up any dust. They live without leaving a trace, not because they had nothing to say, but because they never dared to say it. They hid behind duty, behind "I don't have time," behind "that's not for me." They were obedient. They were responsible. but they were never free. And it's not that they did things wrong, it's that they never tried to do them right, their way. They never asked themselves what would happen if they followed their intuition, that soft voice that doesn't shout but insists, that doesn't push but breathes, that doesn't command but knows. Look at the story of Giulia, a 43-year-old woman who lived in Florence. She had a clothing shop passed down through generations, every garment perfectly folded, every customer greeted with politeness, every day the same as the last. Until one afternoon, while sipping coffee in the square, she saw a group of young people painting murals on a gray wall. She kept watching, not because of the colors, but because of the freedom. She went home and didn't sleep that night. She didn't know what had shifted in her, but something inside her wasn't in the same place anymore. A week later, she bought paint. She started with one wall in the bathroom, then a corner of the storage room. And just like that, without meaning to, her shop turned into an improvised gallery. Customers started taking photos in front of her paintings. She went viral. But that was the least of it, because inside, Giulia had come home. You don't need to change your life. You need to change your relationship with yourself. And that happens when you start listening without censorship. When you stop demanding results and allow yourself to try, for the simple act of being present again, of doing something because it calls you, not because you should. That's the difference between existence and presence. Everyone exists, but being present in what you do, that's an art. And like all art, it's born from an energy that doesn't ask for permission. It just asks not to be blocked. Some of the most creative people in history were rejected before they were admired. Van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime. Kafka died without knowing his words would change generations. Emily Dickinson wrote over 1,800 poems that she never published. They didn't create for fame. They created because they couldn't not create. And you? What are you putting off just because it doesn't have a clear form yet? What idea are you silencing because you don't know if it's good enough? What desire are you suppressing because it doesn't fit into what's expected of you? That's where real creation begins. Not in technique, in honesty, in the decision not to wait for approval to start being yourself. Creativity isn't about a perfect outcome. It's the permission to begin with what you've got. It's opening the door without knowing what you'll find. It's letting yourself be surprised by what comes through when you stop trying to control it. It's having the courage to see yourself in what you make, even if you don't like it yet. There is nothing more human than creating, and yet we live as if it were a privilege reserved for others, as if doing something with what we feel were a luxury, as if expressing what we carry inside were only valid if it has aesthetics, success, or usefulness. But the great movements of humanity didn't arise from what was proper. They came from impulse, from mistakes, from rupture, from the daring of those who chose to think differently, to feel differently, to act differently. George Sand, the French writer who dressed as a man to enter cafes where women weren't welcome, didn't write to become famous. She wrote to be free. She wanted to think without someone dictating her thoughts. She loved Chopin, but she also loved her independence. She was scandalous for her time, and yet she became a flame that lit up many women who believed their voice didn't matter. That too is creativity, making paths where none exist, drawing exits where the system gave you a dead end, using your words to say I exist when life wants you to be invisible. And you, even if you doubt it, can do the same. You don't need a clear message. You just need to stop silencing yourself. You don't need a finished piece. You only need intention. You don't need technique. You only need permission. And that permission will never come from others, not from your partner, not your boss, not your kids, not your parents, not your teachers, because creativity doesn't wait for authorization. It waits for commitment. It waits for truth. Do something with what's happening inside you. It doesn't matter if it's not pretty. It doesn't matter if no one understands it. It doesn't matter if tomorrow you no longer like it. Do it anyway. Do it now. Because the longer you wait, the more that inner energy falls asleep. And don't fool yourself. That energy doesn't disappear. It becomes anxiety, frustration, exhaustion without cause. Because what you don't express rots. What you don't release weighs you down. What you don't transform consumes you. You're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you do the same thing, because you think the same, because you hold back what needs to be said, because you postpone what your soul is ready to reveal. So let go. Not everything has to make sense. Not everything needs to take shape. Not everything has to be brilliant. It just has to be yours. It just has to be real. It just has to exist. Even if it's strange, even if it's clumsy, even if it's unclear. Sometimes the thing that saves us most is what we least knew how to do. And if you don't do it, no one will do it for you. Because no one else can create what only you know how to feel. And that, though you may not see it yet, is your greatest power. It's not about changing the world. It's about not letting the world change you. It's about doing something with what you carry inside before it turns into a ghost. Because if you don't express it, you'll carry it. And what you carry becomes weight, becomes a heaviness you don't understand, becomes a nameless weariness. That's what happens to many. They ask themselves why they're so tired when they haven't done anything different. But that's the problem. They do the same thing every day, same schedule, same thoughts, same dialogues, same reaction patterns, same survival mode. And creativity, like any living thing, can't breathe in repetition. Repetition dries the soul. You don't need to change your whole life. You just need to open a window in your mind, change a question, try a new word, make an unexpected gesture, create a space where life hasn't already been decided, where something new can be born, even if it's small, even if it's absurd. Look at Anthony Hopkins. He could retire peacefully with every possible award, but he keeps painting, composing, reciting poetry on social media, doing things he doesn't need to do, but that keep him awake, present, soulful, because he doesn't create to perform. He creates to breathe, because he knows that if he stops expressing what he carries inside, something inside him dies. And it's not about having life figured out. Sometimes you're in crisis, in mourning, in chaos. And even then, you can create. Or maybe because of that. Because when the soul is broken, it's also open, it's permeable. And from there, something real can be built. Creativity is medicine. It's a way of healing without words, of touching without hurting, of speaking without explaining. It's a language that doesn't impose, but transforms. You don't need talent, you need permission. And you don't need everything to be okay, you only need to be available. When Frida Kahlo painted The Broken Column, she was shattered inside. Her body was a map of scars, her pain a constant. But she didn't find art as an escape, she found it as a way to inhabit herself. She painted her suffering, her blood, her contradiction, her strength, and she did it with a beauty that still shakes us to this day. That's the difference between repressed pain and expressed pain. The first one sinks you, the second one reveals you, and to express it, you don't have to be a painter. You just have to find your channel. It might be speaking, writing, cooking, walking, observing, anything that connects you to what you feel without needing to explain it completely. Sometimes people think creativity is inspiration, that you have to wait for it to arrive, that it has to flow, but it's not true. Inspiration is trained, it's summoned, it's provoked, it's cultivated, it's found in the everyday, in the boring, in the unexpected. Meryl Streep once said that she doesn't choose characters that resemble her, but those that force her to discover parts of herself she didn't know. And that's why she never acts the same, never repeats, never copies. Because for her, acting is about exploring, not proving. That too is creating, daring to go where you haven't yet been, even if you don't master it, even if you're uncertain, even if it doesn't come out perfectly. Perfectionism is one of the cruelest enemies of creativity because it demands results before allowing the process. And creating is process. It's risk. It's falling. It's laughter. It's doubt. It's play. It's intuition. And you were born with all of it. You knew it when you were a child, when you built castles with blankets, when you gave a voice to a stone, when you said the sky was made of paper and the trees were dragons. That was your creative brilliance at its peak, because you weren't trying to be understood. You were just playing. Today, the adult you are needs to play again, with your soul, your story, your body. You need to stop pretending that everything must make sense. You need to allow the absurd, the experiment, the disobedience, your own voice. The world is full of people who never did what they wanted out of fear of judgment. And I'm not talking about big dreams. I'm talking about simple things. People who never learned to dance because they thought they'd look ridiculous. Who never sang in public because they were told their voice wasn't good. Who never wrote what they thought because it didn't sound smart. Who never drew because they didn't know how to draw hands. And so, without meaning to, they buried living parts of themselves. They disguised them as maturity, as rationality, as caution. But it was fear. Fear of seeming childish, of seeming clumsy, of seeming crazy. And let me tell you something. I wish more people dared to seem crazy. Because those who stay sane within the margins are often the ones who regret it the most when it's too late, because they never found out what could have happened if they had dared. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be you, with your clumsy ways, with your weird desires, with your misplaced ideas, because right there, in what embarrasses you, might live the most authentic part of you. Don't know it all. Don't control it all. Don't plan it all. Just begin. Take a strange step. Invent something that doesn't exist, even if only you understand it, even if it doesn't come out right, even if tomorrow you look at it and say, "What a mess." It doesn't matter. At least you'll have started. And that first step, even if it seems small, has the power to change you completely, because it's the moment you decide to stop living from fear and start living from creation. And when you do that, everything changes. Even if the outside remains the same, the inside realigns, because finally, someone is telling you yes. And that someone is you. No one's coming to save you. Not your partner, not your parents, not your kids, not your friends, not your therapist, not the course you paid for and left halfway, not even God if you only call on Him when you don't know what to do with your life. No one. And that may sound harsh, but it's also liberating. Because if no one's coming to save you, then you can start moving, not so someone will notice, not to be right, not to succeed, but simply because you can't keep living anesthetized, because repressing who you are is costing you your joy, and joy is not a luxury, it's fuel. How much longer are you going to wait to feel ready? How much longer will you shut down ideas because they don't have a clear shape yet? How many more times will you convince yourself that now is not the time? There's no such thing as the perfect time. It never existed. The people who create don't do it because they have time. They do it because they can't go on without doing it, because they're suffocating, because their soul leaks out through their eyes when they don't listen to it, because no matter the cost, creating is less painful than continuing to pretend. And yes, you're going to mess up. You're going to feel ridiculous. You're going to doubt. You're going to want to delete it all. But that process is necessary. It's part of the pact. You don't reach anything real without passing through the discomfort of being new at something, without swallowing the judgment, without facing the stares, without confronting your own fear. Think of the most beautiful cities in the world: Rome, Istanbul, Paris. Do you think they were designed to be perfect from the beginning? No. They were built, destroyed, rebuilt. They were dirty, chaotic, contradictory. But someone kept imagining, kept stacking stones, designing plazas, sketching maps. The same happens with your life. It's not going to turn out perfect, but it can turn out real. It can have history. It can have layers. It can have cracks for the light to get in. People think creating is for the chosen few, but there's nothing more universal. The body creates cells. The mind creates thoughts. The soul creates direction. Every word you say, every look you give, every gesture creates something in those around you and in you. You can't not create, but you can deny it, repress it, suffocate it until your existence becomes a repetition with no purpose. And then something happens that no one wants to name. You start envying those who dare. You begin to criticize what's new, to judge what's different, to mock what's free. Because what's free reminds you that you are not. What's free confronts you. It unsettles you. It exposes you. But you didn't come here to judge. You came to liberate. You're not just another note in the symphony. You're a melody of your own. And if you don't play it, the world misses out. Do you know how many people out there are publishing terrible books anyway? Saying nonsense into a microphone with more confidence than clarity? Drawing doodles that end up hanging in galleries just because they dared? And you here, doubting yourself because you're not sure you're good enough. As if history remembers the ones who were correct. History remembers those who moved, those who spoke when it was dangerous, those who created when no one understood them, those who risked something within. So, no, this chapter is not here to inspire you. It's here to provoke you, to make you feel anger, if that's what it takes, to make you mad at yourself for having postponed it so long, to make you get up from the couch with your heart racing, thinking, I don't want to spend another whole year without doing what I want to do. Because this isn't a book. It's a warning. It's a shot in the air to see if you finally lift your gaze. You have something to give, something to say, something to create, even if you don't know how, even if you have no technique, even if no one understands it yet. If you don't do it, no one will. Because what's yours isn't replaceable. What's yours can't be copied. What's yours can't be delegated. What's yours can only be birthed by you. And yes, there are many ways to die while still alive. But the most common, the most silent, the most tolerated is not creating. Not creating is agreeing to live only a part of yourself. It's doing the work without putting in the soul. It's speaking without saying anything. It's loving without presence. It's existing without resonance. And you didn't come here for that. You came to leave something burning behind when you go. And even if no one names it, even if no one celebrates it, even if no one sees it, you'll know that you gave something of yourself to the world. And that will be your art. That will be your work. That will be your freedom. Chapter 2. What your body asks for. When the mind goes silent. There's a voice inside you that doesn't shout. It doesn't pound on the door. It doesn't hold up signs. That voice doesn't impose, but it knows. And it has always known. It knows what excites you, even if you don't understand it. It knows what dims your light, even if you hide it well. It knows when you're pretending and when you're breathing. It knows when you're doing something out of desire and when you're doing it out of fear. That voice is your creative compass, your truest signal, your intuition. And it isn't mystical. It's biological. It's ancestral. It's energy organized with more precision than your calendar, more accurate than your arguments, more real than all the things you've learned to say just to fit in. But there's a problem. That voice doesn't come with a megaphone. It doesn't scream to compete with the noise of the world. It whispers through your body. in the unexplainable fatigue, in the lack of motivation you can't quite grasp, in the impulse you dismiss, in the laugh you stifle, in the project you keep postponing, in the sentence you never say. The voice doesn't say, "You must do this." It says, "This feels right." And if you don't listen, it insists in other ways, until your hair starts to fall out, until you get sick, until sadness explodes in the middle of a meeting that means nothing to you, until you look at your life and wonder when you stopped being yourself. And then something in you remembers. It remembers the time you knew exactly what you had to do but didn't, because someone told you not to, because it didn't seem logical, because it wasn't profitable, because it wasn't professional, because it wasn't the right time, and so you let it pass. But you knew. You didn't know why, but you knew. We all have that memory. We all had that inner certainty that we dismissed out of obedience, because we were trained to doubt ourselves, to ask for permission, to justify, to explain, to stay quiet if we couldn't prove it. But intuition doesn't need proof. It needs to be felt. It doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be embodied. Look at Tarantino. He wrote violent, messy screenplays packed with pop culture references when no one wanted to read things like that. In an era when everything had to be polished and commercial, he chose to make films like someone mixing comics, blood, 70s music, and absurd dialogue. Who told him it would work? No one. But he felt it. He knew it was his way, that he had to do it that way, or not at all, and he did it. And he changed the history of cinema. That's the power of an inner voice that doesn't scream but knows. And you have it too, we all do. You just learn to listen to everything else first. Duty, rules, the voice of your parents, your teachers, your bosses, your friends, the algorithm, the market, other people's opinions, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of looking ridiculous, fear of not fitting in. And in the midst of all that, you forgot about yourself. But you can come back. You can always come back. You only need silence, not external silence. You don't have to go on a mountain retreat. I'm talking about inner silence, the kind that shows up when you stop justifying yourself, when you stop explaining, when you stop arguing with your intuition and finally decide to listen. And how do you listen? With the body, with the discomfort that warns you, with the tingling that nudges you, with the calm that shows up when you do what resonates, even if no one understands. Here's a real practice. Write for 5 minutes without stopping, without thinking, without editing, without caring what comes out. Just write what your body wants to say. Do it every day for a week. At first, it will be nonsense. But in the middle of that nonsense, something will appear that you didn't know was inside you. An image, an idea, a complaint, a sigh. That's gold. That's direction. Another practice. When you have to make a decision, don't think it. Feel it. Place the question in your chest and watch how your body reacts. Does it expand? Does it shrink? Does it tense up? Does it relax? The body knows before the mind does. And one more. For an entire day, every time you're about to respond with, "I should," take a breath and ask yourself, do I actually want this? You don't have to change your entire life today. You just need to start questioning why you do what you do. When you begin to hear your voice again, you'll start creating differently, not from pressure, but from authenticity, from desire, from truth. And that's where everything begins. Sometimes it's not that you don't know what to do. It's that you haven't given yourself permission to do it. You're waiting for someone to validate it, for someone to name it, bless it, applaud it, for some higher authority to say, yes, what you're feeling is valid, what you want is allowed. But that moment never comes, because no one else can hear what you hear inside. No one else feels your exact vibration. No one else lives in your chest. That's why if you don't learn to trust your own intuition, You'll live trapped in other people's maps, walking paths that aren't yours, striving to reach places you don't even want to be. And that drains you, that dries you up, because there's no exhaustion more profound than living up to someone else's expectations. Your soul didn't come here to comply. It came to create. And creating isn't doing what works. It's doing what resonates, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's not profitable, even if it doesn't yet follow logic. Look at Lady Gaga. At first, no one understood her style. They called her ridiculous, forced, a flashy knockoff of Madonna. But she kept going, not out of stubbornness, but out of certainty, because she knew her art wasn't a costume. It was a message. It was skin. It was a way of existing. And when time passed, everyone saw it. But she already knew, because she felt it, and that was enough. Intuition comes before success, before recognition. It's the misstep that becomes a path. It's the wild idea that becomes a trend. It's the trial that reveals a door where before there was only a wall. It's the invisible seed that sprouts after the world has already given up. But you need to stop demanding guarantees. Intuition doesn't come with a contract. It comes with an impulse. And if you don't follow it, you stagnate. You die while alive. A woman once told me, "I didn't dare to paint because I felt it was too late, that no one starts something like this at 40. And when I asked what would happen if she did it anyway, she went silent. A year later, she sent me a photo. She had turned her garage into a studio. She'd hung up her paintings. They weren't perfect, but they were hers. She said, "I don't feel like an artist. I feel alive, and that's more than enough." Intuition isn't looking for labels. It's looking for air. Ask yourself this question every time you hesitate. Do I really want this, or did I learn to want it? Because sometimes our desires aren't ours. They're programming, approval disguised as ambition, and they only dissolve when you let yourself feel without judgment. Here's an example: your body. When you're with someone who doesn't nourish you, your body knows before your mind does. It tenses up, it shuts down, it dims, but you justify it because it's not that bad, because it's better than being alone, because I've already invested time. And so intuition is suffocated, not because it's not there, but because you won't let it speak. On the other hand, when you do something that lights you up, you don't need to explain it. You feel it. Like when you find a melody and feel the urge to move for no reason. Like when you talk to someone and time disappears. Like when you dive into an idea and the ticking of the clock becomes a distant noise. That's when you're connected. That's when you're being you, unfiltered. That state isn't magic. It's trainable. It's accessible. All you need is space, attention, presence. Here's a powerful and simple practice. Every morning before looking at your phone, close your eyes and ask yourself, what do I need today to feel like myself? Not to please, not to perform, just to feel like you. It might be a word, an image, a sensation. Write it down and do something, anything that relates to it. Another practice. For one whole day, every time you make a small decision, what to eat, which way to walk, choose what your body asks for, not what your mind rationalizes. Notice how you feel at the end of the day. That's your compass recalibrating. And one more. Listen to music you've never heard. Watch films from another country. Wear something that's not typically you. Break small patterns to train your freedom. Because intuition blooms in free soil, not in controlled ground. Intuition isn't perfect. Sometimes it's wrong, but it always leads you to a deeper truth. It always returns something that belongs to you, and that, in a world that wants you to be like everyone else, is a victory. It's no coincidence that the most authentic people seem crazy at first. It's because they don't follow the obvious. They don't copy. They don't repeat. They hear a different music, and they dance to it, even if no one else can hear. But one day, someone hears it too, and that day they're no longer alone. Creating is just that, dancing to the music that hasn't started playing yet, and trusting that if you hear it loudly enough, others will hear it too, even if it's late, even if they don't understand the rhythm, even if it's hard for them to recognize it. But you're going to dance anyway, because it's yours, because it belongs to you, because it gives you life. And if that's not reason enough to create, then what is? When Einstein said the intuitive mind was a sacred gift and the rational mind a faithful servant, he was offering a map the world chose to ignore. And it ignored it because trusting the intuitive demands courage. Courage to move without knowing, to listen without proof, to create without instructions. We were trained for the opposite, to ask for permission, to respond with logic, to adapt before feeling. And you've lived under that training. You were taught to argue, to justify, to explain yourself. But no one taught you to feel yourself, to recognize yourself, to let yourself be guided by what resonates even if it has no name. That's why sometimes, when you're about to do something that's deeply yours, deeply true, something in you sabotages it, makes up excuses, tells you it's not the right time, that you're not ready, that there are more important things to do. But in truth, it's fear. Fear of the real. Fear of meeting a part of you can't control. Fear of creating something that will truly reveal you. Because when you create from intuition, you can't hide. What comes out is what you are, not what you want to appear to be. What comes out is what's ready, not what you planned. And that's terrifying, but also liberating. There comes a moment in life when you can't keep repeating. A moment when the soul gets tired of pretending everything's fine. A day when your body doesn't respond the same. When your mind can't keep justifying. When the only thing left is to do something different. Not because it's logical, but because it's necessary. Sometimes all it takes is a gesture. One small act, like Diego did. A 48-year-old man who worked his whole life in an insurance company. He had never done anything creative, or so he said. One day, his daughter asked him to help her build a model for school. He didn't know where to start, but he started. Cardboard, paint, tape, figures. Without realizing it, he stayed up all night inventing scenes, decorating corners, adding details no one had asked for. When his daughter saw the finished model, her eyes lit up. But Diego didn't cry for her. He cried for himself. Because that day he remembered something he didn't know he'd forgotten. The joy of doing something just because. The pleasure of using his hands without pressure. The way time dissolves when you're connected to what you're doing. He didn't return to work the same. He started drawing on his reports, decorating the office, redesigning spaces at home. He didn't become an artist. He became himself. That's what creativity gives back to you. Your original form, the one that existed before the rules, before the manual, before the fear. And you have access to that, not through effort, through decision. Pause now and ask yourself, what things did I love doing as a child that made me lose track of time? What did I enjoy imagining, drawing, saying, doing, before I knew what was right or wrong? What parts of me went quiet out of shame, correction, or habit? Write those answers. Read them out loud, not to analyze them, but to remember. Another practice. When you feel like you can't create anything, walk. Walk with no headphones, no phone, no destination. Walk as if your body were a question and the world held the answer. Don't look for results. Just listen. Your mind will try to interrupt, but keep going. After 20 minutes, something will show up. A phrase, an image, an idea. That's intuition, awakening in motion. And one more thing. Every time you think this already exists, do it anyway. It doesn't matter if there are already songs, books, drawings, or similar ideas. None of them were made by you. None of them carry your exact vibration. And that's enough, because it's not about originality, it's about truth. The greatest creators aren't the most innovative. They're the most faithful to their own voice. The ones who don't betray their inner pulse. The ones who do what they feel even when the market doesn't understand it yet. Look at David Bowie, an emotional alien, a musical actor, a character in and of himself. Every one of his albums was a new skin. Why? Because he kept evolving, because he didn't tie himself to one identity, because he dared to change direction even when success had already found him. He didn't stay comfortable, he stayed alive. And that's another sign you're on the right path: fear. When something scares you a little but also excites you, it means you're facing a truth, not an obligation, not a copy, something only you can create. Don't run from that feeling. Move through it. Give it a body, give it hands, give it action. Because your voice is no longer just an idea, it's a decision waiting to be born. And you are closer to it than you think. Intuition doesn't keep time. It doesn't show up at 8. It doesn't wait until you're ready. Sometimes it appears in the shower, on a winding road, in the silence of watching the rain. Sometimes it hides in a song that stirs something in you, in a line from a movie that hits like a prophecy. Other times it arrives as an incomplete certainty. You don't know what to do with it, but you know it's there. The problem isn't that you don't have intuition. The problem is that you don't respect it, because you were taught to distrust the invisible, to ignore what couldn't be proven, to choose the safe, the logical, the measurable. But art, creation, real transformation, they don't come from logic. They come from an inner seed that doesn't care about schedules or applause or explanations. And that seed needs space. Once at a school in New York, a 6-year-old boy made an abstract painting with tempera paint. The teacher, curious, asked what he had painted. The boy looked up, serious, and said, "That's what I feel when I dream I'm flying, but I wake up just before touching the sky." That boy wasn't learning art. He was translating his soul. That's what we've forgotten. Creation is not just communication, it's translation. It's a way to say what doesn't fit in words. It's how we honor what we feel, even if we can't explain it. And to do that, you have to let go of the need to be right. Creativity doesn't seek to be right. It seeks to resonate. It doesn't seek to convince. It seeks to expand. It doesn't seek to conform. It seeks to express. And you have access to that every day. When you cook, when you get dressed, when you walk, when you speak. In every gesture, there's a possibility to create. But if you live in repeat mode, you don't see anything, because autopilot is the death of the spark. Pause. Look around as if you were seeing this place for the first time. Notice the details you take for granted, the color of the sky, the way a curtain hangs, the texture of the air on your skin. That kind of attention is the doorway, because creativity begins with presence. Look at the human body. It creates new cells every day. It regenerates without you asking. It takes days to renew your skin, but it does it. The body knows it can't stay the same, because staying the same for life is the beginning of death. So why do you resist change? Why do you insist on clinging to the same routine, the same phrases, the same gestures, the same thoughts? You weren't born to be repeated. You were born to be lived. And the most alive thing in you is your ability to imagine, to try, to explore, to turn the invisible into something real. But yes, creating has a price. It always has. Creating is discomfort. It's stepping out of safety. It's doing something without knowing if it'll work. It's accepting that it might not, that it might hurt, that it might make you cry, that it might make you feel vulnerable. But it might also give you meaning, and that is worth more than any guarantee. Look at Quentin Tarantino. He never went to film school. He learned by watching movies. He worked at a video store and scribbled ideas on napkins. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a professional camera or academic validation. He wrote scripts like someone composing music with punches, and he made it, not because he knew more, but because he honored his impulse, because he listened to that voice that didn't shout but knew. You have that voice too, but you're burying it under noise, under excuses, under fear, under to-do lists, under news, under social media, under infinite scrolling, under urgent but empty tasks. And no, you don't have to eliminate all of that. You just need to come back to yourself, even if it's only for a few moments each day. 5 minutes, in silence, without distractions, listening to what shows up. Try this. Set an alarm for an unexpected time during the day. When it rings, stop wherever you are. Close your eyes. Ask silently, what is my soul asking for right now? And observe. Maybe nothing comes. Maybe an image, a memory, an impulse. That's enough. That's the beginning. Another practice. For 1 week, do something different each day. Something small. Take a different route to work. Cook something new. Sleep in a different position. Write a note with your non-dominant hand. Anything, as long as it breaks the pattern. Creativity is a muscle, and like every muscle, it needs stimulation. And one more. Draw your fears. It doesn't matter if you draw badly. In fact, draw them like cartoons. Exaggerate them. Give them faces. Make them look ridiculous. Then look at them. Laugh if you can. And realize that most of them weren't as big as you thought. Because creating is also that, seeing your shadows in a new light. And you can do that, not tomorrow, not when you have time, today, with what you have, from where you are. Your soul isn't waiting for the perfect moment. It's waiting for you to trust again. And this time, there are no excuses, because now you know the voice is there. And you've already heard it. Even if just for a second, you've already recognized it. Now the question is, will you keep ignoring it? Or worse, will you go back to sleep knowing you could be awake? When Giacomo Puccini wrote the final notes of Turandot, he knew he wouldn't reach the end. He was ill. Cancer was devouring him slowly, without poetry, and still, he kept writing. Each note, each line, each orchestra of his soul came out like a lament that wasn't seeking applause, just existence. When he died, the opera was unfinished. His disciples completed it in his honor. But at the premiere, the conductor stopped the music exactly where Puccini had left off. He turned to the audience and said, "Here the maestro dies." Total silence. No one breathed, because everyone knew that there was a beauty that couldn't be completed, a beauty that was enough just because it had been born. That is the essence of spiritual creativity, not finishing, not succeeding, not solving, just allowing what is inside to come out. It doesn't matter if it's imperfect. It doesn't matter if it's incomplete. What matters is that it exists, because sometimes creating doesn't change the world. It saves the soul. Most of us seek results, something tangible, visible, measurable. But deep creation isn't about results. It's about channeling, about letting something pass through you, about allowing the soul to say what the ego can't understand. And for that, you must surrender. Not to the world, to yourself. Surrender to the mystery, to what cannot be controlled, to that invisible force that gives you an idea when you weren't thinking about anything, that wakes you in the middle of the night with a phrase, that pushes you to say something without knowing why. That force isn't you, but it moves through you if you allow it. And that's the secret hardly anyone tells you. The greatest creators don't feel like authors. They feel like channels. They don't feel important. They feel chosen. They don't feel like geniuses. They feel like instruments. And you can be one too, if you stop imposing, if you stop demanding, if you step aside and allow something bigger to speak through you. That's what it feels like when creativity is not just an action, but a ceremony. When creating is not just producing, but praying without words. Do this. Find a corner. A small space where you can be alone without interruptions. It could be a corner of your room, a bench in the park, an empty table. Place something there that connects you to what you love. A stone, a photo, a candle, a handwritten word. It's not decoration, it's declaration. That place is your creative altar, your sacred space. It's not about religion, it's about reverence. Reverence for what happens inside you when you choose to listen instead of force, to create instead of control, to feel instead of produce. Once a day, go to that altar, not with tasks, with presence. Sit down, breathe, ask, what needs to come out today? Don't pressure yourself to have answers, just stay. Even if it's 5 minutes, even if nothing seems to happen, believe me, something happens. Because real creativity doesn't shout, it listens. It doesn't impose, it opens. It doesn't dominate, it cares. And at first you won't notice anything. But one day, without warning, you'll feel an impulse, a different idea, a desire to do something you've never done, and that will be your soul speaking to you again. That's where it all begins. Many people believe they have to heal before they can create, that they need clarity, security, stability. But it's the other way around. It's through creating that you heal. It's through expressing that things become clear. It's through movement that you stabilize. Because creativity doesn't wait for you to be perfect. It only asks that you be present. The day you understand you don't need to have everything figured out to begin, that day you'll begin, and that day will be sacred. Because you will have allowed yourself to be a channel, and there is nothing greater than that. You don't have to understand it, just honor it. Like Georgia O'Keeffe did when she painted flowers so large they looked like planets. Like Leonard Cohen did when he wrote lyrics that sounded like whispers from a tired God. Like the earth does when it blooms without permission. And like you can too, now, if you choose to create without explanation. Just because it rises in you. Just because it's what remains when nothing else fulfills you anymore. Because in the end, when you leave this world, no one will remember what you had. They'll remember what you left vibrating, what you inspired, what you moved in others without even knowing. That song you never released, but someone heard by accident. That drawing taped to a fridge. That letter you wrote but never sent. That gesture that became unnamed art. And all of that is art too. And you, whether you believe it or not, are an artist too. One of the oldest, one of the most sacred, one of the most forgotten by your own self. But you are remembering. And that is true creation, returning to yourself, with a soul stained but alive, with trembling hands but empty of excuses, with the certainty that you're not alone, even when silent. And in that silence, if you listen closely, there is a voice, yours, older than your name, wiser than your plans, more you than your story, and that voice at last is ready to create, not out of ego, but out of love. Once upon a time, there was a man who never did anything embarrassing. He never made a fool of himself, never raised his voice, never sang off-key, never stained his shirt, never spoke without thinking, never stepped off script. He always said the right thing, wore the right thing, ate the right thing, and then he died. He died without ever making a mistake, without ever laughing until he cried, without ever burning with a wild idea, without ever falling in love with something he couldn't explain. They buried him with his shirt immaculate, his reputation intact, and his soul intact too, untouched, unused. Do you really want that for yourself? Because if you don't, then you need to do something now, not tomorrow, not Monday, not after you read another book. Now, creating is not a privilege, it's a biological need. It's a voiceless scream that, if not released, rots from within. You don't need time, you need guts. Yes, guts. Because at this point, fear is no longer the problem. The problem is emotional cowardice, that numbed comfort disguised as maturity, stability, or sensibility. But the truth is, you're hiding. You know it when you shut down ideas with phrases like, "Everyone's already doing that," or "That's not for me." You know it when you write something and delete it before anyone sees it. When you dream of something and scold yourself for imagining it. When an idea gives you goosebumps and you convince yourself it's not the right time. And every time you do that, you're telling yourself, "I don't trust me." What if today you decided to trust? Not everything you create has to become a project. Not everything has to be brilliant. Not everything has to serve a purpose. Sometimes what you create is just a bridge, a rehearsal, a way to unearth something that's been asleep. Like someone tuning a guitar without any intention of playing. Like someone singing softly, just to hear themselves again. And that's enough. A woman in Brazil made thousands of paper cranes during a depression. She didn't sell them. She didn't show them. She didn't post them online. She left them scattered throughout the city with messages like, "Life hasn't forgotten you." Hundreds of people found them. Some kept them. Some cried. Some tore them up. But she healed. That was her art. Invisible, intimate, real. And yours can begin that way too. But to do that, you have to stop trying to do it well and just start doing it with what you have, with what hurts, with what vibrates, with what you can't quite explain but can no longer stay silent about. And no, it won't be comfortable. You'll feel embarrassed. You'll question yourself. You'll want to give up halfway. But if you push through, what waits on the other side is priceless. Self-respect. Not the kind others give you, the kind that is born when you finally listen to yourself. When you do what your soul is asking, even when your mind doesn't understand yet. When you stop living like a supporting character in a story you don't even like. That is real creativity, turning your life into a scene worth remembering. Don't wait for others to understand. Don't wait for applause. Don't wait for something to assure you it'll go well, because it never will. And if you wait for that, you'll spend your whole life with the song still trapped inside. And let me tell you something no one else will. If you don't do something with what's burning inside you, that fire doesn't go out. It turns into sadness, into apathy, into dissatisfaction with no clear cause. Because you're not lost. You're disconnected from who you are. And who you are isn't what you think. It's what you do when no one's watching. It's what you feel when you're not pretending. It's what you create when you stop asking for permission. So do it. Start a poem you don't know how to finish. Record a voice note talking to yourself. Dance in the kitchen, even if no one understands your rhythm. Dress weird. Paint something and tear it up afterwards. Write letters with no recipient. Act out a scene. Do something wild. Do whatever reminds you that you're alive. Because this chapter wasn't written for you to understand. It was written for you to act, to open a notebook, to walk without a destination, to write on the wall if you must. And if someone asks what you're doing, answer clearly, "I'm rescuing my soul." Because that's what you're doing, and that's worth more than any life plan. When someone dares to create from their center, everything changes. The environment changes. The way they see the world changes. The body changes. Energy shifts. The future transforms. And if you're still in doubt, think about what will happen if you do nothing. If you leave it for later. If you ignore this spark. If you choose the couch instead of the impulse. Then ask yourself, do you really want to live with that doubt? Or would you rather live with the certainty that, at least once in your life, you gave it a try? What you create now won't be perfect, but it will be yours, and that already is art. Chapter 3. This is where the magic happens. There's a kind of silence that only arises when the soul is fully present. It's not stillness, it's reverence. It's what happens when you stand before something so true you can't think, only feel. It's what occurs when you witness someone doing something from such a deep place that it seems their body is obeying a secret god. That's what happened to those who watched that man dance. The one who didn't dance for fame or technique or music. He danced because he couldn't not dance. No one knew his name. No one knew where he came from. All they knew was that when he appeared, something stopped. The air grew heavier. Time lost its shape. The sounds around faded into murmurs. And then, without warning, he would begin. His body didn't move. It floated, as if his feet only touched the ground out of politeness, as if gravity respected him. There were no recognizable steps, no choreography, just a dance that seemed to belong to another world. And when he finished, people didn't applaud, not out of indifference, but because they knew what they had witnessed wouldn't happen again. What they saw wasn't a performance. It was a miracle that asked for neither name nor audience. Eventually, someone filmed him. It was shared. It went viral. And then came the experts, the technicians, the judges. One of them approached him and told him he leapt over a meter into the air, that the way he landed defied biomechanics, that he was a physical anomaly, that he needed training, structure, control over his gift. That night, for the first time, the dancer thought about his body, thought about his height, thought about the eyes watching him, thought about what he was doing. And the next day, he couldn't dance the same. The leap became effort, the fall, calculation, the dance, a conscious act, and the magic vanished. This isn't a story about fame. It's a story about presence, about that rare and sacred state where the self disappears. Not physically. The I disappears, the one who measures, who compares, who interrupts. When that self steps aside, something greater appears, and that something cannot be forced. It can only be allowed. To create from that place is like lighting a candle at the heart of the universe. It's not inspiration. It's communion. It's not talent. It's surrender. It's allowing something you can't explain to take shape through you. It's trusting that if you disappear, something better than you may show up. And that isn't a luxury. It's a right. It's the remembrance that you didn't come into this life just to fulfill duties, but to expand into acts you can't justify but know are yours. And when you do them, the world changes texture. Reality becomes easier to breathe. Not because everything is easy, but because finally, something inside you fits. If you've ever wondered why some human beings become legends while others just pass through, the answer isn't talent. It's the frequency at which they operate, the channel they access, their capacity to enter that state where they no longer think, calculate, or repeat. They just allow themselves to be taken by what they are. What allowed Michael Jordan to literally fly and make basketball feel like it had been invented by him wasn't just technique, it was trance. He trained, yes. He practiced 1,000 times. But on game day, he let go. And then the body did things even he couldn't anticipate. When they asked him how he did it, he'd say he simply let it happen. The same was true of Robin Williams. In his performances, no script could hold him. He entered and disappeared. And in that disappearance, he found the most impossible characters. He brought to life things he didn't even know he had inside. He laughed, cried, improvised, channeled something only he could hold. Björk said she didn't compose music, that sometimes she felt a strange heartbeat in her chest, like an invisible urgency, and she would run to the studio to record sounds she couldn't explain. She let herself be possessed by atmosphere, by the absurd, by the primal, by what had no form yet. And from that space, she created what the world later called art. Chaplin looked at misery with a mime's eyes and turned it into silent poetry. He said he didn't make films. He said he listened to sadness dressed in humor and let it dance on screen. And then there are those who never acted, never wrote a song, never painted a canvas, but still touched that zone. Ordinary people, people from the streets, people who, one day, without warning, did something so deeply from within that they changed the world forever. Like Bartolomeo Cristofori, who never composed a symphony but built the first piano, or Ada Lovelace, who didn't program a single machine but dreamed up a language that centuries later became code. All of them had one thing in common. They acted from another plane. And that's what you can do too. Not with fame, with presence. Because you don't need to be famous to enter a trance. You only need to be available, to leave your doors open, to let judgment fall asleep, to let ego grow tired, to keep your desire alive. Today, anyone has a creative universe in their hand. If you want to compose music, there's a piano in your pocket. If you want to film, your phone holds more tools than Spielberg had at the start of his career. If you want to teach, you can open a channel and reach more souls than any cathedral could hold. If you want to write, you can do it right now. No editor, no boss, no fear. It has never been easier, and paradoxically, we've never been more afraid. Because the more possibilities we have, the more we judge ourselves, the more freedom, the more comparison, the more tools, the more pressure. But there is a truth no one can take from you. You are surrounded by miracles waiting to be used. You are surrounded by ideas that belong to no one until you bring them to life. And you don't have to invent something new. You just have to make something true. What matters isn't whether the world needs another song. What matters is whether you need to make it. What matters isn't if someone already said it. What matters is if you need to say it. What matters isn't whether you'll make a living from it. What matters is if it gives you life. All the great creators in history, the famous and the anonymous, have one thing in common. A moment when something whispered to them, "Do it." And they did. Sometimes in secret, sometimes afraid, sometimes clumsily. But they did it. And that whisper is passing through you too. You don't hear it with your ears. You hear it when you grow quiet, when you move away from the noise, when you do something for the sheer joy of doing it, when you enter that frequency where there is no judgment, only action. And that's where everything begins, not with perfection, with surrender. A boy once spent the afternoon drawing dragons in his notebook. When asked why, he said, "Because if I don't draw them, they stay stuck inside." And that is exactly what happens when you don't create. Everything stays inside, and it rots, and makes you anxious, and disconnects you, and you start living without spark, without direction, without soul. But if you draw your dragons, even if no one understands them, even if they come out crooked, even if you lose them later, you will have done the most sacred thing. You will have entered a trance with your own essence. You will have given shape to the invisible. You will have continued the work of creation. And that act, even if you don't realize it, is immortal. The creative trance is not a state reserved for artists. It's a dimension accessible to anyone brave enough to get lost in what they love. It's the place Messi draws poetry with a dribble. The place Chaplin made us cry without a word. The place Da Vinci blended science with breath. They didn't do it for perfection. They did it because they couldn't help it. And if you haven't felt that yet, it's because the world has filled you with filters. Because every time you've wanted to begin, the voice appeared. The one that asks if it'll be worth it, if it will be any good, if anyone will understand it, if there's time, if it's worth the effort. And that voice which claims to protect you is really clipping your wings. But you already know this. You feel it. There's a part of you that, when it stops thinking, begins to create. And it's not about painting or writing. It's about moving with truth, about putting your hands into the invisible and shaping it without fear, about returning to the place where you don't need a reason to act, only the urgency to express. And if you don't know where to start, begin by looking. Look at all that already exists, everything already in your favor. The water that runs just by turning a tap, the light that appears with a click, the toilet that flushes with a button. You think that's normal? That is the result of centuries of creativity. Someone dreamed of not having to run into the jungle to relieve themselves. Someone dreamed of not carrying buckets of water. Someone wanted the darkness not to mean endless night. Everything that seems natural today is the fruit of creation held with madness, with rebellion, with faith, and you live within that miracle. If you think the universe isn't conspiring for you, look in the mirror. Look at your eyes, your hands, your ears. Look at how you breathe without trying, how you walk, how you love, how you imagine. And yet you still wonder if you're creative. Do you really doubt it? You were created. Everything you make from now on is just your way of saying thank you. And if you're not creating, it's not because you can't. It's because you've forgotten what you already are. And this voice, this moment, is here only to remind you. If you had to draw your gratitude for being alive, how would you do it? Not with words, not with the usual gestures, with something that pours out of you and only you could have made. What would that offering look like? A song, a text no one will read, a plate arranged with care, a gesture no one expected, an idea that's never been written in a book. That is true creativity, not the kind that serves, the kind that honors, the kind that gives thanks for being alive by continuing the original movement. Because if you're here, it's because someone, many, before you chose to act, to dream, to imagine, to disobey, to create without knowing if it would matter. And thanks to them, you breathe now, surrounded by inventions once thought impossible. There was a day when someone said, "What if fire could travel through a wire?" Another day, someone thought, "What if music could be trapped in a disc?" Then someone asked, "What if we could see the person talking, even if they were across the world?" And another, long before screens or microchips, decided that time deserved to be measured and created a clock powered by the sun. None of them knew how, but they knew they had to try, because that attempt was more real than all the certainties. And now you can open an app and learn to play the piano you don't have. You can compose a symphony with digital loops. You can illustrate a universe without knowing how to draw. You can write, record, share, edit, publish, teach, learn. Everything that was once a luxury for a few is now within reach. What stands between you and your creation is not possibility. It's the voice that still tells you it's not the time. But that voice isn't yours. It's inherited. It's an old recording that plays when your creative frequency rises. It's the signal that you're close to something important. And if you cross it, if you don't obey, if you look at it with respect and say, "Thanks, but no," then you enter. And when you enter, everything starts to move. Not instantly, not always clearly, but you feel the electricity, the tremor in your hands, the fire in the idea, the impulse that doesn't come from your mind but from somewhere deeper, somewhere truer. And right there, creation begins. Not of the work, of you. Because every time you do something without obligation, every time you act without explanation, every time you express something you can't explain, you're rebuilding yourself. You're making yourself again, and that heals you, even if it doesn't show, even if no one sees it, because it makes you real, and what's real doesn't need witnesses. Think of everyone who has walked this earth, those who invented, who healed, who sang in towns where no one listened. Many died never knowing their ideas would become seeds someone would gather centuries later. And yet, they created, because something in them didn't ask for applause. It only asked to be born. That thing inside you, it's the same voice, the same pulse, the same vibration that moves through every human being the moment they stop performing and become presence in motion. Don't ask yourself if you can. Ask if you can bear not to. Don't ask if it will matter. Ask what happens to you when you do it. Don't ask if others will like it. Ask if you feel more alive when it's happening. Because that's the real sign, not whether everything turns out perfect, but whether you feel whole as it unfolds. And if you ever doubt what you're capable of creating, don't think about the geniuses. Think about those who acted without knowing what they were doing. The one who knitted a blanket that saved someone from the cold. The grandmother who invented a recipe without one. The worker who improvised a tool that later became a model. The child who scribbled a monster that inspired a film character. The anonymous soul who spoke a phrase that became the motto of a generation. Those acts happen because someone was available. You can be available too. All it takes is one thing. Stop waiting for guarantees. The deepest art was never planned. It was a response, a release, a question without an answer, a breath in need of a body. And that idea inside you, the one that feels absurd, the drawing that might not be good, the choreography with no music, the text that resembles nothing you've read, maybe that is exactly what the world needs. And you don't need anyone to confirm that. You already know. You feel it. It burns inside. And even when you try to ignore it, it returns. Because it isn't a whim. It's a calling. And callings, when ignored, turn into absences. And you didn't come into this world to be absent. You came here to burn. You came to carry forward what millions before you began. You came to become part of the unnamed symphony that humanity has been composing since it discovered it could imagine. And the note that's missing might be yours. If you've ever wondered whether you truly belong here, just look around, not with judgment, with awareness. The very fact that you can breathe, move, think, feel, that alone is the result of a creative sequence so vast, so precise, it can only be met with reverence. This isn't poetic exaggeration, it's spiritual physics. Every cell in your body is vibrating within a web of connections that science can barely replicate. And still, we forget. We forget that for you to be alive right now, the universe had to organize itself with unspeakable precision. The exact distance from the sun, the perfect balance of gases in the atmosphere, the right blend of minerals in your blood, the invisible flame keeping your heart beating at this very moment. All of this is happening while you're wondering whether you're enough, and all of it is in your favor. Not as a reward, as your inheritance. Because you didn't arrive here by accident, you were placed, willed into existence by a force that doesn't deal in mistakes, a force that expresses itself through constant expansion, relentless creation, a natural drive toward more. And when you create, you align with that movement. You're saying, I follow the pulse, I carry on the miracle, I make myself available, I become an extension of the mystery, and that changes everything. You no longer create to be validated, you create to give thanks. You no longer express to impress, you express to expand. Because once you understand that the act of creating is embodied gratitude, fear dissolves, not because it disappears, but because it no longer commands. Because your intention is not to shine, it is to respond. Respond to the fact that you were born with eyes that see, hands that touch, a tongue that sings, a mind that dreams. Do you really believe that's random? Sometimes all it takes is standing before a flower, not to name it, not to photograph it, just to witness, to see how it was built, how it breathes, how it holds itself without collapsing, how it blooms without knowing whether it will be cut, how it simply exists, needing no explanation. And if a flower can do that, why can't you? But of course they trained you for utility. They raised you for results. They told you that if it's not useful, it's worthless. And so creativity became a luxury, a hobby, a decoration for spare time. Nothing could be more false. Creativity is not an accessory. It's an instinct. It's a natural function of the soul. It's the language your spirit uses to say, "I'm still here." And if you don't use it, it doesn't disappear. It distorts. It becomes noise, anxiety, complaint, criticism, cynicism. Because when the soul cannot express, it becomes bitter, and it hurts. Not like a stab, but like an absence, a silence that poisons everything. So you start looking outside. You change your surroundings, your partner, your city, your job, but you never change yourself, and so nothing really changes. Until one day, by accident, you do something senseless. You cook with intention. You sketch on a napkin. You dance alone. You sing in the shower. You play with words. You forget yourself. And in that moment, you feel something like life. That feeling isn't nostalgia. It's memory. It's your being reminding you who you were before you were domesticated. It's your spirit touching your shoulder, whispering, "You still have time." And of course, you still have time. Because as long as you're alive, you are being called to continue the unfinished. What your grandfather never completed, what your mother never dared, what your neighborhood silenced, what your country crushed, what your lineage forgot. You're not just creating, you're repairing, redeeming, healing a chain of silence that must not go on. And to do that, you don't need to create something big. You need to create something true. Something you can't help, something you can't explain, something you can't release. And when you do it, even if no one sees, the universe will know. Because the universe responds to what is real, not with rewards, with peace. And that peace is worth more than any applause. If you could thank those who made your creative existence possible, where would you begin? With your mother, who sang to you without knowing music, with that teacher who said a phrase you've never forgotten, with the inventor of the keyboard you now type on, the pencil you use, the software that lets you record your thoughts with ease. The list would be endless, because what you enjoy today is a chain of invisible acts, of ideas that were never awarded, of wild thoughts that dared to be born. If Bartolomeo Cristofori hadn't imagined an instrument with keys and strings that responded to the soul, Mozart wouldn't have poured his storms into it, nor Beethoven his thunder, nor Chopin his sighs. If Edison hadn't challenged the dark, Chaplin wouldn't have had light or a screen where his silent sorrow could come alive. If that unnamed inventor hadn't designed the flush valve for human waste, you'd still be looking for a tree to hide behind every time your body needed to let go of what no longer serves. And if Gutenberg hadn't dreamed of putting words into everyone's hands through his wondrous printing press, perhaps today none of us would know how to read, let alone live in the world we know. Creativity is hereditary, but it doesn't pass through blood, it passes through risk. Everything you use, everything around you, everything you take for granted was once heresy. A joke to many, a waste of time, something that served no purpose. Fire was a once-in-a-lifetime spark in a primitive night. The first bough was a stick bent by hunger. The wheel was round long before it was useful, and the first drawing was a silent scream in a cave by someone who didn't know they were inventing art. That's how it works. One acts, another improves it, another transforms it, another takes it to the next level. And just like that, what was once fringe becomes the norm. What was once a miracle becomes mundane. Look at Fangio, Senna, Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton. Watch their unbelievable grace on wheels. If a madman like Henry Ford hadn't obsessed over putting a motor on every street, none of them would have felt the velocity they now embody. Ford didn't race, but he paved the dream of thousands. Look at Michael Jackson. Where does his energy come from? From a mix of talent, yes, but also from James Brown, from Sammy Davis Jr., from black and white films where dancing was still mime, from church musicians clapping like rhythm was oxygen. And before them, someone invented rhythm. Someone hit a stone for the first time. Someone realized there was a beat beyond the heartbeat. Everything that moves you today is the legacy of a brave act. Everything you see as possible was once unimaginable. Everything you admire was once considered useless. And here you are, child of them all, carrier of that flame. And instead of feeling part of it, you ask yourself if you're ready. The problem is they taught you that to be creative, you need to be original. No one told you what you really need is connection, to connect with what already exists, with what others left available, to connect with what your grandmother never dared, with what your father never found words for, with what your teacher kept hidden. Creating isn't inventing from scratch, it's remembering, it's continuing, it's reconfiguring. And if you need proof, just look at your phone. It's a symphony of centuries, a piece of metal full of pixels that responds to your voice. Who made that possible? Someone who thought it would be a good idea to store memory in glass. Another who dreamed in code. Another who obsessed over touching a screen. Another who, instead of sleeping, kept programming. Now you use it to watch memes, or to record your thoughts, or to share an idea that might change someone's day. Either way, you're using inherited creativity. You're breathing air that others held with their lungs. Technology is the skin of human creativity. It isn't the enemy, it's continuity. It isn't cold, it's the soul extended by those who saw the world as a beautiful, creative possibility. And the best part is you don't need to thank them out loud. It's enough to do something with it. Because if you don't create, the chain breaks. And maybe that phrase you're about to write is the one that'll inspire a little girl in Tanzania. Maybe that song you record will be hummed by someone who thought life no longer had rhythm. Maybe that short film you're embarrassed to share is the first heartbeat of a new generation of creators. You'll never know, and you don't need to. All you need to do is your part, from where you are, with what you have, with your limits, with your story, with your scars. And when you do, you'll feel your soul settle, not because everything's fixed, but because everything finally makes sense. And that is more than enough. That is your part in the work. Not all miracles look like stars. Sometimes they look like a grandmother teaching someone to sew, a child scribbling in a notebook no one will ever see, a simple gesture done with full presence, an idea no one understood in its time but that, years later, saved a life without knowing it. Not all miracles make sound. Some are only felt, like when you do something no one asked of you but your soul needed to offer. What you call talent, the wise call availability. Being there when life wants to speak through you. Being space. Being a channel. Being a willing body. Being nameless fire. You've witnessed the creativity of others all your life. You've walked on sidewalks designed by minds long gone. You've used objects someone once dreamed up, tools someone dared to build, technology someone imagined in a long night without applause or likes. You've read words that weren't yours but saved you as if they were. You've cried with songs written by someone who never met you. You've laughed with films born from the fear of a screenwriter who doubted their own story. Now it's your turn, not to compete, not to impress, to reciprocate. To give back what you've received, to become part of the flow, to be more than an echo of what's been lived, to be an impulse for what's to come. Maybe you think you have nothing to say, that it's all been said. But that's not true. No one sees the world through your eyes. No one shares your rhythm, your wound, your way of looking, your way of telling. That is irreplaceable, and that is exactly what's missing. Creation is incomplete without you. Not you as a person, you as a bridge, you as a stroke not yet drawn, you as a living fragment of a poem no one else can write. And it doesn't matter if what you create seems small, because often the most invisible things are the most needed. The word you offer in private, the drawing you leave on a bench, the video you post even though your hands are shaking, the idea you release without knowing if it will serve, the gesture, the detail, the movement that doesn't seek to be seen but is charged with soul. Creating isn't a grand act, it's an intimate one. It's kneeling before what insists on being born and saying, "It's okay, do it through me." And if you dare to live that way, it no longer matters if you win, if you publish, if you stand out. What matters is that you are awake. You're in the dance. You're in trance with life. And that, even if no one applauds it, changes everything. Because someone who creates doesn't live the same. They walk differently. They breathe differently. They love differently. They listen differently. They're more present, more real, more tangible, lighter. And the world needs that. Not more noise, more truth, not more content, more soul, not more experts, more humans who dare to feel. Look at yourself. You're alive. You're reading this. You're connected. You're available. And if you've made it this far, it's because something in you already knew. Your fire is not out. It's just been waiting, waiting for space, waiting for silence, waiting for permission. And there are no more excuses. You have what you need, not because everything is in place, but because you've already chosen to wake up. And waking up is enough. Go outside. Look at the sky as if you'd never seen it before. Breathe like the air is brand new. Listen to the smallest sound. Do something with your hands. Write even if you don't have a story. Sing even if you're off key. Draw even if you don't understand proportions. Get messy. Move. Laugh. Break. Undo. Play. Risk being ridiculous. Risk being you. And if doubt creeps in, close your eyes and remember that you are the direct descendant of creation. You are made of the same fire that once sparked those who dreamed of wheels, of light, of melody, of flight. You are part of that unbroken chain of sacred madness that dared to imagine what didn't exist. So don't waste it by living as a mere consumer. Be a creator. Be the continuation. Be the spark. Do what only you can do. And if you don't yet know what that is, then start with what scares you most. That's where it's hiding. Because creativity isn't something you go out and find. It's something you recognize. And once you do, once you see it clearly, it won't let you go. Not even if you try. And now that you know, do it. Do it as an offering. Do it as a testimony. Do it as someone who knows the silence has ended. Because this may be the end of the chapter, but it's not the end of you. You have just begun. Chapter 4. The Art of Not Asking for Permission. In a neighborhood forgotten by the maps, where concrete and rust greeted each other without ceremony, lived a man known as the Timekeeper. He didn't sell watches. He didn't repair clocks. He wasn't a poet or a teacher. But from time to time, someone would arrive at his house with desperation in their eyes and a phrase they all repeated, "Life is slipping away from me." Then he would smile, open the door, and without a word, lead them to a small room at the back of the house. Inside, there were only clocks, hundreds, antique, modern, broken, dysfunctional, each one marking a different hour. The man would close the door behind them and say, "Don't come out until you know what time it is." Then he'd leave. At first, people protested. They shouted, demanded explanations, but no one answered. In time, the silence would grow heavier than the chaotic ticking. Some despaired, others cried. Some tried to fix the clocks, but there was always one who, amid the chaos, would sit down, close their eyes, and ask without words, "What time is it inside me?" And then, without a sound, they knew. They came out changed, not with answers but with direction. That was his way of teaching. He didn't tell them what to do. He simply revealed the place where there's no choice but to create, the place where certainty collapses. You're there now. This is the moment when what you knew is no longer useful, when there's no technique, no theory, no step-by-step guide that fits. All that's left is what vibrates, what appears without permission, what rises without explanation. And that moment, though it may feel like a void, is your creative cradle. Because the wildest, most human, most divine act you can perform is to create without asking permission. Not from your family, not from your culture, not from your own fears. To create without excuses, without schedules, without instructions. That doesn't mean being irresponsible. It means being loyal. Loyal to your intuition. Loyal to that absurd idea that came to you while walking. Loyal to the impulse that doesn't fit your education but refuses to let go. Loyal to your desire to leave something of yourself in this world, even if no one understands it. Do you know what all great creators in history have done? They disobeyed. They disobeyed the molds, the paths, the expectations. They disobeyed duties that didn't represent them. They even disobeyed their own comfort. And they did it without guarantees. Van Gogh didn't sell his paintings. Tesla died in debt. Kafka asked for his work to be burned. Nina Simone was silenced. Egon Schiele was arrested for his drawings. Frida Kahlo was ridiculed for painting her own face over and over. But they did it anyway. Because if they hadn't, they would have died. Not their bodies, their souls. And you, if you're reading this, it's because you too know that you're wagering something greater than recognition. You're wagering the dignity of inhabiting yourself. Creativity isn't a gift. It's an act of rebellion, a yes to your fire when the world expects you to go dim, a no to the safe path when your body is screaming not to continue, a way of saying, I exist, even if I don't fit. And yes, that's terrifying, because when you do what you love, there's no one left to blame. You can't hide behind, they made me. I had no choice. This is what I was supposed to do. When you choose to create, you're saying, I choose how I want to live. And that is freedom, but it's also vertigo. That's why most people don't create. They copy, they imitate, they repeat, because it's easier to echo than to be a voice. But you weren't born to be a repetition. You came to be an expression. And that, dear reader, begins now, here, without a script, without permission, only with what you are. And that, believe me, is more than enough. There comes a moment when you realize you don't need more ideas, or more advice, or even more books. What you need is to stop running from what you already know, not with your mind, with your skin. You know it when you feel you're in the wrong place, when your body stiffens, when the words no longer sound like your own, when the days start looking too much alike. And right there, in that silent hollow, something appears that doesn't come from the outside. It's not an epiphany. It's not a voice echoing with mysticism. It's barely a vibration, as if something were saying, without words, do it differently. You don't know where it comes from, but you know it's real. That moment, if you honor it, can change your life. But we almost always postpone it. We disguise it with being busy. We distract it with productivity. We push it to Monday or to the new year. We dress it up as maturity, as commitment, as responsibility. But deep down, all we feel is, this no longer represents me. Creation begins there, when you stop acting out of inertia. You don't need a grand story. You just need to stop betraying yourself. That alone is a creative act, immense, because the world is full of spectacular stories that were never told. Not because of a lack of talent, but because of too much fear, because of the trap of wanting it to be perfect from the very first try. What if today you do something without the weight of having to get it right? What if you allow yourself the luxury of experimenting without having to show anyone? What if you stop reporting to others and start surrendering to who you are? This isn't utopia, it's soul hygiene. Do it however you want. Do it in a whisper. Do it on torn paper. Do it awkwardly. Do it dancing without knowing how to dance. Do it as play. Do it as protest. Do it without knowing how it ends. But do it. Because if you don't, your energy will look for another outlet, and if you don't let it express itself, it will distort. It'll come out as anxiety, as exhaustion, as anger, as cynicism, and you'll convince yourself that life is just like that. And no, it's not. You're just repeating something that needs to be transformed. That's what the creative act does. It turns what was rotting into a seed. But to do that, you have to get into the mud, into the discomfort of being new, into the shame of not knowing, into the madness of doing it anyway. Creating means placing yourself in a scene where you have no script, where the character is you, unmasked, where the action is unpredictable but sincere. And that's why it's scary, because deep down, we all want to be loved. And to be loved for who you truly are, you have to show it. And showing it means risking not being understood. But what's the alternative? Keep hiding behind what works. Keep repeating what no longer resonates. Keep playing a part in a play you didn't write. You weren't born to be background. You came to give shape. Shape to your impulses. Shape to your chaos. Shape to your questions. Shape to your existence. And that shape doesn't need awards. It just needs to be lived. A woman in Portugal decided to tattoo every drawing she made during a year. Not because they were good. Many were absurd, childish. But each one represented a moment in which she had listened to herself. Her body ended up covered in imperfect lines. But when people asked her why, she replied, "Because I'd rather carry my marks than my silences." That's the real measure. Not how much you achieve, but how much you listen to yourself. How much you allow yourself to be wrong, how much space you give to what vibrates before it fades. There are too many successful people who can't stand themselves, and there are simple, anonymous people who live as if each day were a play worthy of being performed. Which side do you want to be on? You don't have to leave everything behind to start anew. You just need to stop turning your back on yourself. And that starts with a gesture, not a huge one. One that's yours. That gesture will be the first in a new sequence. A sequence where you begin to choose again, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but because you no longer want to keep walking in borrowed skin. And when you take that step, the world changes, not because it transforms, but because now you're seeing it through yourself, and that, even if no one notices, changes everything. Some say they don't have time to create, but what they really lack is inner space. It's not the clock that keeps them from starting. It's the judgment. It's the pressure to do it right, to make it useful, to make it meaningful to others. And creativity isn't born in control, but in intimate disarray. It doesn't arise from the demand to be admired, but from the decision to be honest. Authentic creation doesn't ask for permission because it doesn't come from reason. It comes from a deeper place, a freer, more visceral place. It's that voice that awakens when you're alone, when you're not fulfilling any role, when you finally stop performing for someone else. That's when the real impulses appear. And that's why they're scary, because they don't follow rules, they don't fit your plans, they don't answer to anyone. There's a scene I've never forgotten. A young man, maybe 20, on a train, furiously scribbling in a notebook. He was wrapped in a kind of energy that wasn't rage, it was urgency. I approached out of curiosity, not to speak, just to observe. What he was writing was illegible, twisted, disordered. Words without coherence, drawings between sentences, sentences between lines. And yet, it was beautiful. It was real. Every stroke seemed to have a life of its own. The young man closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and leaned back, as if he'd just saved himself, as if he had just released something he couldn't keep holding. I don't know what that text was. I don't know if he ever cleaned it up, shared it, published it, but I know there was pure expression there. No pretense, no shape, no goal. And that is what the world is most in need of. Too many people are waiting for the perfect format to say what they feel. The right language, the professional frame, the approved style. But truth doesn't wait for that. Truth wants to be born however it can, even if it doesn't rhyme, even if it doesn't fit, even if it doesn't look good in a post. Truth wants out, and if you don't let it out, it becomes inner noise, knots, symptoms, emotional exhaustion. That's why, when you create without chasing perfection, something in you is freed. Something falls into place. It doesn't solve everything, but the energy shifts. The essential gets aligned, as if, finally, you were standing in the only place you were meant to be, not out of obligation, out of truth. And then you start to understand it's not about being talented. It's about being available. Available for what lives in you, for what keeps trying to surface, for that thing you've been carrying on your back that only transforms when it turns into action. You can't keep waiting to have it all figured out before starting. Clarity comes after the movement. Clarity comes after you've done it, after you've tried, after you've messed up. Mistakes aren't the opposite of the path. They are the path. Look at the ancient alchemists. They didn't aim for exact outcomes. They mixed, tested, failed, tried again. And yet they uncovered processes that centuries later became science. They weren't chasing certainty. They were chasing transformation. And that's what you should do. Don't chase certainty. Chase transformation. A woman once told me she started molding figures out of clay during the pandemic. She knew nothing about the material. She'd sit on the floor, close her eyes, breathe, and sculpt without thinking. The figures were misshapen, imperfect, often incomprehensible, but each one represented an emotional state. She called them my solid states. When she showed me one, I was moved, not because it was beautiful, but because it was exact, as if that shape expressed something that couldn't be said in words. And that's the point. Sometimes we don't want to be understood. We just want to be expressed. The art of not asking for permission isn't a rebellious attitude. It's an act of care, of no longer postponing yourself, of making room, of honoring yourself. Because if you keep waiting for others to approve you, you'll lose the best years of your soul. And worse, you'll start believing that the thing you never did no longer matters, that it was childish, unnecessary, naive. But it wasn't. It was urgent. It was yours. And even if you can still do it, if you postpone it too long, it might start to hurt. Not because you ran out of time, but because you no longer recognize yourself in what you do. Because every time you repeat yourself, you erase a little more. Every time you silence an idea, you dim a spark. Every time you choose what's safe, you drift further from yourself. That's why you don't need approval. You need permission, your own, right, not to publish, but to hear yourself. Paint, not to sell, but to breathe. Speak, not to convince, but to release. Dance, not to please, but to shift your inner place. Do something with what you feel, even if no one understands it, even if you don't know what you're doing. Because what you're doing is sacred, and that, even if no one's ever told you, is more than enough. It's creation, it's therapy, it's prayer, it's fire, and you're already inside it. All that's left is to recognize it and keep going, without fear, without permission, but with soul. There's something no one ever told you, maybe because no one fully knew, or maybe because it got forgotten with time. Every time you create something from your truth, you're collaborating with the universe. You're finishing a sentence. God began in silence. You're responding to a signal that was launched from the very origin of everything, hoping that one day you'd receive it and give it form. Creating isn't just doing. It's becoming part of something greater. It's remembering that you're not alone when you invent, when you play, when you draw, when you write, when you cook with love, when you dance without an audience, when you do something nobody asked for, but your soul did. Because there's a force you can't see, floating in the air like electricity waiting for a channel, and that channel is you. Not because you're special, not because you're different, because you're available. You don't need to study spirituality. You're already part of it. Every time you breathe, every time you feel an idea, every time something inside you wants to come out and you don't know how to explain it, you're already participating. What you've been led to believe is that creativity belongs to the enlightened, the artists, the wise, the gifted. But it doesn't. Creativity is a conversation with the invisible, and we all have a direct line, if we're willing to listen. A woman in Scotland used to write letters to people she didn't know. She would choose names at random from a phone book. She wrote short, sweet, sincere messages. She told them everything passes, that even sadness blooms, that there is beauty in pain, that the soul never fully abandons itself, that someone, somewhere, believes in them. She never signed them, she just sent them. For years, no one replied, until one day at a poetry festival, she heard a woman recite a line that sounded familiar. It was one of hers. The woman had received the letter without knowing who sent it. She copied the sentence into a journal. It became a poem. That poem saved her daughter during a crisis. That daughter now paints, and she painted that phrase on a mural. It all began with a letter without a recipient, with a sentence that simply needed to be said. That is creating. That is participating. That is being in service of something greater. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to prove it. You just need to give with what you have, with what you feel, with what you can't yet name but already lives in you. Sometimes it shows up as urgency, sometimes as tenderness, sometimes as pain, sometimes as an image. The format doesn't matter. What matters is the offering. When you offer what you feel, something realigns. The body relaxes, the mind opens, the soul lights up. Not because you created something perfect, but because you made yourself available. And that, even if unseen, transforms everything. Think of the waves. They don't control where they go, but they keep coming. Not because someone tells them to, but because that is their way of existing. That's how your creativity should be. A wave, a way of moving, of expressing, of allowing yourself to be, without needing to know where it leads. That's not ego, that's trust. A trust that doesn't impose, but is felt. That doesn't shout, but illuminates. That doesn't need a stage because it knows its purpose is not to impress, but to offer. And what you have to offer, even if you underestimate it, is a fragment of the great universal poem. Every creative gesture you make is a word that was missing. Every impulse you dare to honor is a piece of the cosmic language. And if you don't do it, that piece remains missing. That chord remains unsung. That tone goes unheard. So it's not that you need to create. It's that life needs you to create. Not so you can be somebody, but so a part of existence only you can translate is not lost. The practice is simple. Today, do something in silence. Do it as if it were a prayer. Do it without any intention of showing it. Do it as if every movement were in agreement with the eternal. Do it as if someone, somewhere, is waiting for your reply. Because maybe someone is. That is the art of creating without permission, understanding that you were already authorized the moment you were born. And if you still doubt it, close your eyes. Think of what you love most. Think of something that moved you beyond explanation, a scene, a piece of music, a glance, a smell, a forgotten letter. That thing that made you feel more human, more present, more real. was created by someone too. And now it's your turn, not to match it, but to continue the chain as if the whole universe were writing a poem and your verse has not yet been written, but it must be spoken, and only you can speak it. Most people don't stop creating because they run out of ideas. They stop because at some point someone made them feel their ideas weren't worth it. Sometimes it was a teacher, sometimes a parent, a partner, a boss, a stranger. Sometimes it was the entire culture. Sometimes it was themselves. But the outcome is always the same. The soul is locked in a cage of common sense. And in that cage, it slowly begins to die in silence. You are breaking that cage. Every page you've read, every word that resonated, every image that formed in your mind while reading is an open door. And an open door is never quite the same once it's been opened. It doesn't matter if you still don't know what you're going to do. It doesn't matter if you don't know how. What matters is that now you know you can, that you have permission, that no one but you can stop the energy you carry inside, and that this energy doesn't need explanation. It only needs space. Look at life. Notice how everything is in motion. Water, wind, fire. Even the mountains in their apparent stillness are constantly transforming. Only fear stands still. Only resignation becomes stagnant. Everything else pulses, flows, reinvents itself. And you are life. So how could you remain still? Creation isn't about art. It's about rhythm, about connection, about remembering that you're here to leave a mark, not to erase your footsteps for fear of falling. A woman in Morocco decided to embroider her dreams onto handkerchiefs. She didn't know how to write, but each stitch represented a word, an image, a memory. She hung them along a line that crossed her home. One day, a little girl selling bread passed by. She stood there gazing at the handkerchiefs. She asked what they were. The woman replied, "These are the things I never said." The next day, the girl came back with a notebook. She asked the woman to dictate. She wrote down the dreams. One day, they stitched them all together, and what began as an attempt not to forget became a book that spoke the language of the soul. That is what it means to create. That is what it means not to ask for permission. That is how you leave a crack where life can seep in. It's not about changing the world. It's about not giving up before you've even tried. It's about doing what you can with what you have. It's about not swallowing any more ideas, about not postponing your intuition again, about not standing on the sidelines of your own story. And if fear shows up, remind it of this. You are not here to meet expectations. You are here to manifest. You are here to witness your own expansion. What you do with your creativity is just the form. But the essence is this. You have returned to yourself. And when someone returns to themselves, when they reinvent, when they choose themselves, when they stop adapting and begin to unfold, something in the universe aligns, as if a forgotten note began to play again, as if a missing piece returned to its place, as if the world suddenly breathed a little better. Maybe you won't notice it right away. Maybe you won't get applause. Maybe no one will see it, but you'll feel it. Because what awakens when you express from the soul doesn't go back to sleep. It stays. It expands. It becomes a new way of seeing, of speaking, of loving, of being. And that state is freedom. You don't need to be applauded. You need to be you. You don't need to become famous. You need to become real. You don't need to do it perfectly. You need to do it now. And if you're waiting for a sign, this is it. If you're waiting for an excuse, there's no need. If you're waiting for someone to tell you that you can, here it is. You can, and more than that, you must. Because the world doesn't need more copies. It needs what you are about to create. The question is no longer whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing to try, to feel, to fail, to shine, to make people uncomfortable, to disobey, to play, to say, "This is me," without needing to explain. And if you are, then this is not the end. It's the beginning of the only work that only you can create. Your life, lived from within. Make your voice a tool. Make your soul a workshop. Make your days a sequence of acts that need no justification. Do something every day that reminds you who you are. And if one day you forget, come back to this book, not to read it, but to continue what you started. Because you didn't come into this world to survive. You came to create, and you have already begun. And so this book ends, but not your fire. If something in you has awakened, if something wants to be released, if something refuses to be silenced, then don't stop. Here at Let There Be Light, we will continue to reach you, to guide you on the journey you deserve. And until then, make your life the masterpiece no one else can sign. See you soon.